like to call Monday, September 18th, Richmond City School Board meeting to order. Madam Clerk.
Will the board members who are present please respond? Ms. Dorr? Ms. Dorr?
Here.
Mr. Barlow?
Here.
Ms. Benz Herb? Here. Mr. Young?
Here.
Ms. Cosby? Here. Ms. Owen?
Here.
Dr. Sapini?
Yes.
Ms. Page?
Here.
You have the floor, Madam Chair.
Next item.
Madam Chair, may I? If anyone needs an interpreter, please let me know. Raise your hand. Si alguien ocupa intérprete, por favor, levanta su mano. And just as a sidebar, this past 2 weeks, we served about 8 different schools in the Richmond Public School System with interpreters, and it was a blast.
Thank you, Ms. Hernandez.
The next item is a pledge of allegiance, followed by a moment of silence.
Ms. Dorr, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated.
The next item is 1.03, adoption of the agenda, and I only have one change. Item 6.04 is received for action, establishing funding and cultural and climate ad hoc committees, not a resolution. That's the only change I have, Madam Chair.
Okay. Need a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that we amend the agenda to include consideration of a resolution pertinent to Senator Kane's and Congressman Don McEachin's efforts in Congress, specifically pertinent to tax credits and rehabilitation thereof.
I'll second that.
On the question? So the agenda has been amended as received. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing that we have none, the agenda has been amended as received. Next item.
The next item is 1.04, and it's to approve the minutes of the meetings that are listed on your agenda. I did receive some edits from Ms. Owen, and those edits have been made. I have not received any other changes. I just ask that you approve them at this time, Madam Chair.
Approve the minutes as received. All in favor?
Aye.
The next item is to receive a presentation from the Richmond Fire Department.
Good evening. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for allowing us to be here in your presence. We stand here united. And on behalf of Mayor Stoney's initiatives and commitment to reducing poverty and mental illness while enhancing the all-inclusion of a quality education and supporting public safety, we declare our united support through the abundant offering of school supplies to Richmond Public Schools. Through education and preparedness come opportunities to champion the mayor's initiatives and beyond. As all successes within the fire industry, we could not have reached our goal without the support of our community. We're the product of education here in the city of Richmond and beyond, and we want to make sure that successful legacy continues. So on behalf of members of our Richmond Fire Department, organization, Local Union 995, as well as Brothers and Sisters Combined, and of course with the endorsement of our fire chief, we present this offering to the school board for your school supply scheme.
On behalf of the Richmond Public Schools School Board and the administration, I would like to first thank the Richmond Fire Department for everything they do for us each and every day. This is an organization that no matter what, they're there for us. No matter the time of day or the time of night, they're there, and they always go above and beyond the call of duty in dealing with the Richmond Public Schools, and we appreciate it. We really appreciate the money because we're always short of funds. We do appreciate everything you do, and we look forward to continuing our relationship and educating all 24,000 students here within Richmond Public Schools. Thank you all very much.
Next item.
The next item is item 3, public information. I have one speaker who signed up in accordance with your bylaws. What is your pleasure?
We have members in the audience that would like to speak at this time. Please come forward. State. Please come forward, state your name, and if you're speaking as an individual, you have 3 minutes. If you're speaking on behalf of a group, you have 5 minutes. And I know that we have a speaker that has signed up. If we allow them to come forward first.
Ms. Spriggs? Ms. Spriggs? I have no one else who signed up, Madam Chair.
Okay. We'd like to welcome former school board member, Mr. Coleman. Welcome.
Thank you. Yes, there's no pen up here. I want to follow all the procedures. My name is Donald L. Coleman. I'm speaking as an individual. To the honorable school board members and administration, thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity. I see at 4.02, we have to discuss the process for filling the 7th district vacancy. We all know the details behind the resignation of a fine 7th district representative, former representative Nadine March Carter. But I'm here tonight to just encourage us to make sure that whatever this process is, that it is fully released specifically in the 7th district, that we can make sure that everybody knows what it would take to apply for the interim, going for the office, eventually at some point, because at this stage of the game, it is just so critical that the 7th district have representation. The other thing I would say to you all, I've had the opportunity to be in the process of appointing someone. And that really is an amazing, challenging situation. Because the fact that when somebody's elected, the people elected the person. When someone's appointed, those who are on the school board are choosing for the people of that district. So it is my hope also that in you all's process, that there are ways that you allow the citizens of the 7th district to influence you in hearing their passion and heart around the people who decide to put themselves in for nomination. And again, I feel that there's opportunity for that, and I'm sure you all will remain open to allowing people to possibly contact you and share their perspectives on who they would want in that interim seat. Again, thank you all so much. After doing this for 8 years, you guys have been doing it for 8 months, so I got a little leg on you still, but this is good work and important work. And the appointment of the 7th district interim person is a really, really big deal. Thank you all.
Thank you. Next item, I'm sorry. If we have other members in the audience that would like to speak at this time, please come forward. Seeing that we have none, this concludes the public information portion of the agenda.
The next item is item 4, board business. 4.01, receive a report on the superintendent search from Hazard Atia Young and Associates.
We're still working this out. Good evening, everybody. We have spent 3 wonderful days here, and of course we had an online survey, and we're about to give you the results of all that tonight. I have my 2 colleagues here, Ann Monday and Hank Harris, and we're going to do it in 3 sections, and then I'll come back up at the end for any questions you have. I hope you got the read ahead. We sent them out Friday night, Saturdays, some other stuff came to PowerPoint. We're going to try and use the PowerPoint up here. It washes out a little bit, but if you have the executive summary of the PowerPoint, that'll probably do you for tonight. So without further ado, I'm going to bring up Ann Monday to give you the results from our focus group meetings.
Thank you and good evening. It's been wonderful to spend time in Richmond and to get to know some of you and to meet some of the wonderful people who work in your schools and some of the students and staff as well. Let me frame my discussion with you tonight by letting you know that you're going to hear things in kind of 3 pieces. I'm going to start with reporting to you what we've heard in our focus groups, what common themes we heard. You've also received as a read-ahead an executive summary of this information and a summary of the literal notes that we took in these sessions. So you have lots of information. What I'm going to give you is the broad brush of it this evening with what we heard in what we're calling common themes. After that, you'll hear about the results of the online survey, and then finally, the desired characteristics that combine both what we heard in our interviews and the online surveys. And again, you have all of this in writing so you can review it in more detail. I'm going to begin with slide 1. Do we have somebody doing this, or? Up arrow, yes. Oops. All right, thank you. To begin with, let's look at the numbers. We interviewed for a little more than 104 people in a number of focus groups. I will tell you candidly, we were disappointed that there seems to have been some communications issues, and we did not have a healthy turnout among some constituent groups. We were disappointed in that. However, those people that we did talk to, those 100 or so folks, had a lot to say and feel deeply about the school district, and their opinions will be shared with you this evening. At the same time, we had 653 constituents, stakeholders, respond to the online survey, which we think is a healthy number. So you can look all together at the kind of feedback that we got and what we'll be reporting to you this evening. I'm going to start in the consistently report. Before I start, one more thing. At the request of the board, we also reviewed the input that you got last spring from a focus group that you held, that I think you felt pretty good about the number of people that participated. We read those notes and we found a high degree of correlation with those notes and our notes. And in fact, when you get to the desired characteristics at the end of our presentation this evening, there was almost identical findings with our notes and our data and what you heard from that group. So we did consider that input as well, and I know that that was something that you valued and wanted to make sure that we valued as well, and we did. First of all, I'd like to talk about the strengths, and in all three of these categories, strengths, challenges, and characteristics, these are listed in alpha order, not in priority order. So let me go through these. You have them in front of you and you have them in writing as a read ahead. These are the things that we heard from our focus group participants are the strengths of the Richmond schools at this time. Community partners that support schools in many ways. We are so impressed with the numbers of grants, nonprofit organizations, and businesses that support your schools. Competitive compensation in the region. We believe attracts and hopefully holds good employees. Long-term and committed employees support staff, teachers, and administrators. Great deal of respect for the people who work, many at the school level, and I have to also single out teachers in particular, because when we asked strengths, teachers in terms of staff were the most frequently mentioned. Neighborhood schools at the elementary level that foster great community pride, great loyalty to some of the elementary schools that are neighborhood schools and have served the unique needs of their neighborhood. Potential for positive change, and I want to kind of stop on this one because that's, make sure you understand what we're talking about here, because when I talk about challenges in a minute, we're going to reflect back on this. This is a unique time in your history, and people would say things like the stars maybe are aligned. I understand that many of you are new in your positions. You have a new mayor. There's a lot of new energy. There's a lot of optimism. And there's a sense right now that there is a huge opportunity to make a difference in this community. And we are certainly communicating that to potential candidates, that this is a place where there's a lot of optimism and opportunity. There is a rich history in Richmond schools, with many distinguished alumni and students returning to work in the schools. Richmond is the capital city, and there's a great deal of pride around Richmond and the entire state of Virginia, and it is certainly an attractive place for families to live and a place where people want to work and live. Additional resources include, especially in terms of compared to other school districts in the region, lower student-teacher ratios in some cases, tremendous amount of parental support in many of our schools, many of your schools, and also volunteers. We met people who come from local churches and community groups who give an extraordinary amount of time to help students in the schools. And finally, school choice. I know there's some issues around school choice, but a lot of your stakeholders believe that this gives opportunities for students and families to decide on the curriculum focus that they want. So those are the strengths that we heard in our focus groups. Challenges. Challenge number one is the alignment of leadership, including the school board, the city council, superintendent, and city manager, need to align those relationships around a common vision. That is, again, a concern and an area that hopefully with such determination and sense of optimism that I just talked about, that will be something that this city can achieve. We really wanted to talk about direct communication, district communication, and transparency to overcome some of the negative assumptions about Richmond Public Schools. We were struck by the number of people who spoke almost entirely about the needs and the negative. We had to kind of probe for the positives, but we know that they're here, and when we probed, we heard them. But people we believe need to be, including leadership, told that you need to talk about what you're doing well because you're doing things well. We heard a lot about employee morale being low. Right now, as there always is in a point of transition, there's a lot of concern about change. A lot of your employees are not sure what's happening, and that always creates some morale problems. And again, the image of the Richmond schools that is felt in the community and in your schools sometimes is entirely negative, and that reflects in attitudes. Issues around facilities, I don't think that's something that you're not aware of, and that came through in our interviews with people and in our focus groups. You'll also have facility needs around capacity and possibly needing to look at consolidation, so clearly that's an area of concern. The new and inexperienced school board is a challenge. Challenges are not necessarily negative, they just are challenges, and that is that this board will be finding its character and its operational, will be developing as a board, and that gives you the potential to embrace the new superintendent and make some needed changes. Continuing with challenges and concerns, poverty and increasing numbers of diverse students and the resources that are required, but at the same time, knowing that poverty cannot limit expectation of academic achievement for all children. We heard certainly that you cannot ignore the real issues of poverty and diversity, but that cannot be used as an excuse, and your constituents and your stakeholders do not want you to do that. Let me also point out that we heard that your numbers, there's growth in your Latino population, which is requiring new resources and sensitivities, and that's a real challenge. Standard operating procedures lacking at many levels, with particular emphasis in human resources. I understand you've made a change there, and we understand it's a positive change, and that you're already looking at ways that you can improve your human resources systems. But we also saw a lack of communication between schools, central office, some of the issues that are not unusual in school districts, but certainly we observed them and heard about them here, so certainly we're going to want to look at that. Strategic plan and vision needed for a long-term direction. I think that's, again, one of the reasons why we're here, is you're looking to address some of the needs that you have with a strategic plan, and that's something we heard is a need. I want to take just a moment on the next one and add a little bit to this. Student emotional, social, and behavioral issues impact learning. Probably of all of the concerns and needs that were discussed, this had the most emotion around it from people who spoke with us. You have students that don't just have financial or needs around poverty, but come to school with some real emotional and social needs as well. And you have many people who care deeply for these children. You care deeply for these children and want to make certain that those needs are met, and that there's a clear recognition that we have some young people that bring to school some pretty heavy burdens. At the same time, behavioral issues are a concern. We heard about concerns around addressing behavioral issues in a just way and in a productive way. That overuse of suspension has been an issue and continues to be an issue. At the same time, it would not be, we would not be doing our jobs if we didn't say to you that there are parents and students and staff who are concerned about ongoing behavioral issues with students in schools that they do not feel are being adequately addressed. So those issues around what I would call school climate are ones that are important and must be part of the picture here. And certainly not lastly, but lastly on this list, student achievement. The gains have been made, and there is work in progress, and you've got some good foundations built for academic achievement, but all schools must be accredited. Desired characteristics to address these concerns and to build on your strengths. Ability to attract, recruit, select, and develop and retain high-quality staff. That comes almost directly off of the outcome of the online survey, and I think that again reflects some concerns around human resources that have been highlighted and that were certainly reflected back to us. Ability to build trust and relationships, a real builder of relationships and in the political realm as well as in the district, in the operational realm and in the schools. You need somebody who can work with the city in the district, in the division, and in the with the other political leaders. Approachable, accessible, and visible in schools and all aspects of the community. I think these pretty much stand alone. Creative thinker, independent, and not afraid to challenge the status quo with out-of-the-box thinking. Lots of people told us they want to hear some new ideas, and they want people who are not afraid to challenge what's not going well. Educational experience, preferably including urban education experience. We'd say probably almost a necessity that has some urban education experience. Excellent communication skills, high integrity, honesty and ethics. Operational and facility experience, has some background as in the management of those operations, although I have to say that what we heard was that as important as the facilities issues are, there was concern that they overtake the most important work of the system, and that is academic achievement and making certain that the well-being of all students is addressed. Passion, vision, skills, and talents to improve student achievement in an urban school system. Obvious. And then supervision for accountability and decisiveness, high expectations, holding people accountable, modeling high expectations, being accountable, being able to make the hard decisions, especially around personnel and performance. And then, again, it just turned out alphabetically to be last, but almost every group brought up they want someone who wants to be here, who will commit to this community and this city, wants to be an integral part of community life, and will, again, be a committed leader for your district. So that's what we heard summarized here. Again, you have it in different forms that you can reflect upon. We will be using this information as we move forward and look at candidates. Any questions about what I've provided for you? We will now share with you the results of the online survey.
Thank you, Ann. So the online survey is ongoing. It was open for about 3.5, 4 weeks while we were doing these focus groups. And we recognize the fact that we started in August, actually before school started, and it was a little slow coming in. We put out some feelers for your communications department to push it, and we got a good response. At one point I thought we were over 1,000, but I was adding the total plus all the categories, and that's just a band director, former band director making a math mistake, so I'm sorry about that. But we asked 2 basic questions on the online survey. One is, how is the district currently doing? And we asked we break it out by constituents. And then the other question that basically gets asked is, what type of leadership profile are you looking for in your superintendent? So, pushing on the button, there we go. So there's the 653. You had 3 groups respond at very high rates. One was the parents, which is always nice, 32% of the respondents. The others were teachers, that's always great. And then finally, community members. So you really did hear from a lot of those people. And if you look at the numbers on that second page, you can see there were huge numbers of all three that responded. The following statements are perceived to be the district's strengths currently. It's that the district engages with diverse racial and cultural and socioeconomic groups, engages the community, which is always strong. Those are a lot of times we don't see that as strengths in the community, so that's good. Working to close the achievement gap, you do get credit for that. Obviously that's a focus here, but the online respondents did give credit for that. Technology, we didn't really hear a lot about technology in our focus groups, and yet on this online survey, it did come across as one of the strengths. And finally, interesting, this one also is, we saw it as a need in our focus groups, employees, affected teachers, administrators, and support staff. And as Ann said, many of our focus groups went out of their way to praise the Richmond graduate who came back to student teach in Richmond, who became a teacher in Richmond, or the principal who did the same thing. Many of your employees are committed to Richmond almost from birth back to teaching in the schools, and that's not bad. The executive summary of profiles looking for in a new superintendent. So there it is again. It's funny, it was a strength in the current state, but now it's also a desired characteristic in the leadership, which is find great personnel for employment and retainment, the professional climate of mutual trust and respect amongst faculty, staff, and administrators. We do think communication will improve that. The culture of high expectations for all students and personnel, plan and manage long-term financial health, and be sensitive to the needs of a diverse student population. This chart, very hard to read, especially if you're in the audience. There was an executive summary printed out, but it basically is showing which groups said what at what level. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this chart, but I will spend some time on this chart, which is even worse, okay, in terms of the community reading it. However, this chart also is on that printout, and I just want to bring out the first question. Now remember, these percentages you're seeing are people who hit a 4 or a 5, a strongly agree or an agree. And the first question is actually, please rate the overall quality of education in the district. Interestingly enough, one of the lowest scores here comes from the administrators at 9%. That is awfully low. Because that's interesting, when you get down to teaching and learning and community engagement and management, the administrators are rating it pretty highly, which is kind of a disconnect, and you almost want to dig into that further. I also found fascinating, even though only 10 students responded, 30% of them rated a 4 or 5 in their education. They were actually the highest group rating your school district in terms of quality of education. That's not bad. Teachers were at 19%, which is 10% more than administrators, and the overall average there is 15%. Then you can go into these other things down here where the community engagement, that was your highest one. You can see right across the board there. I'm down under community engagement, 38, 44, 22. These were all very, very decent scores. And engaging with diverse racial, cultural, and socioeconomic groups, again, under community engagement. All very strong. It's interesting when you have the numbers of respondents that we had in this, the 54 administrators, the 107 community members, the 211 parents, and 81 support staff and 190 teachers. It is pretty interesting to see how they see the current state of the district. So I would encourage you to look at these numbers. You also received the online comments from each of these groups. They had some open-ended questions. Read through those. We read through all 26 pages of those. Those are pretty interesting too. And finally, this one shows the top 4, each category's top 4 items. So there's the administrators with the first 3. The community members have the same first 3. The parents and students attending school have the same. I mean, this is strong across the board for those first 3, which are the recruit, employ, foster. Now this is looking for what you want. I've switched now to what you want in a leadership profile. So everybody wants that with the exception of students. Students didn't rank that real highly. Foster a positive professional climate of mutual, again, across the board, and establish a culture of high expectations for all students, and their students weigh in, that's their top 1. So that's good, that's wide agreement. It's interesting that teachers did not have established a culture of high expectations for all students and personnel, but I think that's because most teachers think they are doing that and it doesn't need to be stated. And then you see community members, their bottom of the top 4 was provide a clear, compelling vision for the future, which also was picked by students. And then that other one with 3 across is be visible throughout the district and actively engaged in the community life, which was administrators, students, and support staff. So those are, it's always interesting to see the top groups and how they line, but those first 3 are awfully powerful with the one exception of students in there. And that's it for me, except I will say that, again, what we saw in the online survey certainly backed up what we heard, and that's always good. We rarely see it different, but this is a very good, and it even goes back to your May focus groups. What we saw in your May focus groups, what we saw in our focus groups, what we saw in the online survey, I think we've really captured a reflection back of what the community is telling us. Hank's going to come up. It's a little redundant because Ann did a slide on desired characteristics, but we put it into more of a narrative, and we will see how Hank does, and then I'll come back up for questions at the end and a little more comment. Hank?
Good evening, Board. I'm going to take you just through the final few slides. And just in context, so my colleague Ann began with a conversation about what we learned in the focus groups. My colleague Brad spoke about what we learned in the online survey. We take both of those bodies of work. In your case, we also took what we learned from the work that you did with your community before we began our work. We bring all that together and we put together what we call our desired characteristics. Not to be confused with what you heard as the desired characteristics a little bit earlier, so there's a nuance there, so let me just make sure we're clear. When Ann spoke about the desired characteristics, those are the desired characteristics that are being put forward by your community. That list is what we were hearing in our focus groups as the desired characteristics. It's one of the questions we asked. At this stage in the presentation, we're pulling together all those bodies of work that I just enunciated, and you're going to see a great deal of overlap. But this particular document is what we use as our screening tool. We also, it will be made public, which therefore our candidates or our prospects or people who are thinking about applying for this position will see this document, and they will hopefully see whether they are the match for the important work of being the superintendent of schools. So in our desired characteristics, you're going to see four impressive qualities that we are expecting the candidate to bring forward if they are going to be seriously considered for your superintendency, and then you're going to see 4 experiential requirements. So let me walk you through them. And as you read these particular paragraphs, I'm not usually one who reads screens while people are looking at them, but in this case I'm going to, because not only is the topic in bold important, but the words underneath are very intentionally chosen, each one. So I'm a fast reader, I won't belabor this, but I think it's important that you and the public hear what this is saying, what is important, that after seeking input from board members, parents, staff, students, and community via focus groups, interviews, and an online survey, the Board of Education of the Richmond Public Schools seeks a strong educational leader who possesses these following characteristics. Number 1, communication skills, visibility, openness, and transparency. The Richmond superintendent will need to be a superb communicator who can develop relationships with all stakeholder groups and work to unite the staff and the community. The superintendent must be visible, approachable, and willing to listen to different points of view in order to promote positive, respectful relationships in offices and schools. He or she will be the face of Richmond Public Schools, and in this capacity must be able to articulate a positive vision for the future and secure the public trust by being authentic, transparent, and honest. Number 2, the ability to hire and develop skilled people, set high standards for performance. The superintendent will need to put practices in place to ensure that quality people are recruited, hired, and retained. The superintendent must develop a strong team in the central office that will model high expectations and create a culture of excellence in the district. Being able to develop a quality workforce, to collaborate, and to build functioning teams are important leadership characteristics for this position. Our next 2 are expert, knowledgeable, change agent, and problem solver. The critical academic and operational issues that must be solved at RPS require someone who has a track record as a problem solver and change agent. While one person cannot know everything, the new superintendent needs to have the experience and knowledge needed to deal effectively with the serious, long-term social, emotional, and academic challenges of a diverse urban school district. At the same time, the superintendent will need to be able to manage school operations and address facilities and fiscal challenges. The superintendent needs to have expertise working in an urban setting and have passion for this work. And we need the superintendent to be strong, courageous, and committed. Confident, strong, respected, not afraid to tell the truth, bold, willing to make changes, courageous spirit. These were some of the ways that stakeholders described the ideal characteristics of a new superintendent. The district wants a strong leader to look up to who will provide the direction, change, and support it needs. The staff and community want a leader who will commit to Richmond and stay long enough to affect lasting change. The city will strongly embrace someone who takes the time to get to know and understand what is special about Richmond, sees its challenges as opportunities, and instills hope. Those are our four qualities or attributes as I describe them, and then there are four experiential requirements. Certainly, demonstrated visionary leadership in a diverse school or school district or large organization. The first two, I should say, are absolute requirements, and the bottom two are preferred requirements. So we just described the visionary leadership in a diverse school district or large organization, and certainly eligible to be certified as a superintendent in Virginia. There also is a strong preference for somebody with an earned doctorate from an accredited institution, and there is a significant interest in someone who has been a superintendent. That's certainly a preference. It's not a showstopper if they have not been a superintendent, but it certainly is a preference. I'm going to turn it back over to my colleague, Brad.
Thank you, Andy Hank. So this really, and I think that desired characteristics really is almost inspiring in terms of how we screen your applicants. And we've been very busy screening the applicants. We're developing the pool. We've been working with your search committee, and we have most of our dates that we need for moving this whole thing to completion. I feel very good about the pool. I feel very good about the process so far. I want to thank Ms. Wilson for her assistance, Mr. Kranz for opening up the schools to let us in, and all those things that normally go with all the logistics of running these focus groups. They're not easy to do as we travel around the city for 3 days. But it's been a very good experience for us, and we're very thankful. I am open to your questions. You have a lot to read. We gave you a lot to read over the weekend. For the community, you did not see your personal comments tonight with some typos, and I didn't see too many. I saw 1 or 2 spacing issues or something like that. We're going to post this. We're going to post a 25-page written report that includes what teachers said, what board members said, what school administrators said, and you will see your comments there if you were in the community forums. We also will post the online survey report. So all 3 things are out there. Not only do we do that to let the community see how transparent we're trying to be in this process, it's also our greatest recruitment tool. Because one of the things we always ask the applicants as we're screening them is, well, have you written materials on the website? And some of them, you know, they might fudge a little and say yes, and then we say, well, why don't you talk to us about what you've seen there, and have you done any research about that? So it works both ways for us, that we use this as a tool for recruitment, and we think, again, your input and even what you started in May has been very helpful in this. I'm open to questions. Ms. Wilson, a lot of this 15 minutes, we have blown the schedule, I understand that, but I'm open to your questions or comments. Yes, sir, Mr. Barlow. Oh, that's right, you're the chair, you gotta recognize him.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I appreciate you, all the work you put into this, and I know that it has been a substantial amount of work. And I'm really encouraged to see, in particular, that we got a lot of feedback from teachers and faculty and support staff via the online survey, but not so much in focus groups. And I just thought I'd see if you can elaborate about why that may have been the case.
Well, as you see from the written report, we did get a lot of comments, but you're asking why we didn't get more numbers. One is that we were here in August for 2 days, and then we came back on September 12th to try and catch people during that. We thought we'd get more success on the 12th, but we didn't have a lot of teachers show up. We didn't have a lot of school-based administrators show up. Those are groups we normally talk to, and you know, it could be it was the second week of school. Irma had just been threatening the world, or at least the East Coast, and I can't explain it, but that's where we were a little disappointed. You're right. But the people who we did talk to, and they were very, very, they were illustrative in their examples. Sometimes you can talk to 100 people and you don't get as much as we sometimes get from 10 people, so that's always interesting too.
Mr. Young?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I first inform is thank you to all the terrific work that HYA has done to date, and we look forward to continuing to collaborate with you pertinent to your good work. I do have a question for you, and if you're unprepared to address this, then that's fair. So please just be candid with me. But my question specifically regards our candidates. I'm not going to request anything of you in public that would violate confidentiality. But if you're prepared, can you speak to how many persons have submitted an application? How many folks have applied to date?
It's a fluid number, and the reason I say it's a fluid number is a person who may have submitted 6 weeks ago, in fact, we know of one who got a job, so they're no longer a candidate, but they might be in the database yet. There are other people who tentatively try, but the number is one of the largest I've seen in a long time for a search, and we are well over 50 at this point.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
But it is fluid.
Ms. Young, you have a follow-up question?
Yes, ma'am, briefly. Thank you for that. And are you prepared to opine on why you think so many persons? You just referenced that we've had a lot of demand for the position. Can you, in your experience, fielding superintendent search?
It seems that a capital city, the other time I've had a large number was in another capital city in the United States, and I don't know if it's a high profile, and quite frankly, Richmond, for all the reasons that Ann gave that we got from your community, we see the redevelopment, we see you still have a commitment from your businesses, you have community faith-based organizations that support the schools. It's just a very, very ripe time, and we have people who are applying who have that mission of wanting to work in an urban environment, and they actually can articulate why Richmond is a good urban environment to work in.
Madam Chair, so you were supposed to say because we have a terrific new school board.
Because you have a terrific new school board.
Do we have any other questions from board members at this time? Well, on behalf of the board, we would like to thank you for this presentation and the work, all the work that has gone into this presentation. It's very comprehensive. I think it represents a cross-section of the school district. It's very detailed, and I think it will be beneficial to this board as we go forward in making one of the most important decisions that we will have to make during our term. Again, thank you.
Thank you very much, and we look forward for our next 6 to 8 weeks together. Thank you.
Next item.
The next item is 4.02, discuss the process for filling the 7th district vacancy.
Before we discuss the process to fill the 7th district, I would just like to take a minute at this time to really recognize and thank our former colleague, Ms. Nadine Marsh-Carter. She will truly be missed. She was truly a servant. She was the voice of reason on this board. We appreciate her dedication and commitment. And Mrs. Marsh-Carter, she led the charge with technology and the trauma-informed care. Those were her two passions. And she led the charge with those initiatives. Again, she will be greatly missed. And it's going to be hard to replace her. So we can start with the next item. Ms. Lilly.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Board members, I put at your desk a proposed timeline for the interim appointment. We know, and just for public consumption as a reminder, we did do this in February. There are two parts to this. There's an interim appointment, and then there's a special election that you will vote on the resolution for that later in the night. But at this point, we're dealing with the interim appointment, and you know, based on the notes, that you may appoint an interim within 45 days of the vacancy. This Marsha Carter's vacancy occurred on September the 5th, and that makes your appointment due date, if you're going to appoint Friday, October the 20th, that's the 45 days from the 5th. If the board does not appoint, of course, the court can make the appointment. And I understand that there is traction for going ahead and making that appointment. And so what you have here is a proposed timeline. Just as a note, a public hearing is required. And of course, we need to have 10 days notice in the newspaper of that public hearing. But also that public hearing has to be at least 7 days prior to a vote on the candidate, on the interim appointment. And so this proposed timeline uses your scheduled meetings, and basically it goes as follows. September 19th, the clerk will issue your notice of vacancy, and that is posted on the website and whatever mechanism or method the postings are made. And then shortly after that, because of our timeline, we'll have to place the announcement for the public hearing in the newspaper. The suggested timeline states that by September 29th would be the deadline to submit the resumes and letters of interest by 12 noon. Because using your scheduled meetings, the next scheduled meeting would be October the 2nd. And so the 12 noon time frame gives the clerk enough time to make certain between that time and the scheduled meeting on Monday that everyone has been vetted through the registrar's office to make sure that they're eligible to hold the interim spot. On the proposed timeline, you'll see that on October 2nd, as I said, you will do, I didn't say this, but October 2nd is your next scheduled board meetings, and that's where you would have your interviews and your public hearing, with your interviews going first and your public hearing after that. And then on the 16th, which is your next scheduled meeting after the 2nd, you would deliberate and vote during that meeting. You can also deliberate on your meeting of the 2nd based on what's on that agenda. And then the selected candidate would take the oath of office as early as the 17th or some day thereafter, and can participate in your next scheduled meeting, which would be in November, or any other meetings that happen before that time frame. That's the proposed timeline. You know, that's what we have proposed at this point in time.
Ms. Dorr has a question.
Ms. Lilly, with the appointment of a 3rd district representative, I can't remember, did we have public comment the same night as interviews?
We did. Okay, we did. And actually, yeah, you had a separate meeting for both of those. Is that correct?
You have a follow-up question?
Yes, they were on the same day.
They were on the same day.
Yes.
You have any other questions from board members about this process? And this is still fresh in our mind. Mr. Barlow?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Lilly, I see that we're obviously here discussing the appointment of the interim position, which implies that we'd be having a special election at some point in the future. Can you give us an idea of what that would look like, and just like to hear about that.
The special election can take place in the November 2018 general election with that, or the board can elect to have an earlier date than that. It just cannot be, of course, this November.
Ms. Barlow?
I know this doesn't happen that often, although it's already happened the second time during our tenure. But a year seems like a while to wait, though I understand that there are a lot of expenses and efforts that go into holding a special election. Have we ever explored the idea of holding it in conjunction with the primary?
For this particular cycle, I did not explore that. I can there's something in my mind telling me that you can't do it during the you cannot hold a special election. That's correct, I did see that. You can't hold a special election, if I'm remembering correctly, during the primary. It has to be like by itself or general election. Confirm that. Well, let me say this. I need to confirm it tonight because you all are under the deadline for filing your petition with the court, because that's a third part of this. You need to file your petition within 15 days of the vacancy, and that takes us to the 20th of September, which is in a few days.
Any other questions? And this is action item.
The proposed timeline, the resolution for the special election is in your action items, but we do need to get some, I guess, consensus as to moving forward with this timeline or not. I don't know, Mr. Barlow, if his question relates more to the timeline of the special election versus the interim appointment timeline, so we do need to know whether the board is in agreement with this proposed timeline or wishes to consider something different.
Mr. Young?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And like you, I see that in a few minutes we will receive for action a resolution pertinent to this. I guess my question for Ms. Lilly regards if, because you wanted to get back to my colleague from a second, just to confirm, can we address this, or do we need to do all of it at once? In other words, the timeline you've presented now, can we take that up now, or do you need more time to address Scott's inquiry?
Right, it just depends on whether or not the answer to that question impacts your decision on whether or not you make an interim appointment.
So, Ms. Lilly,
Yes.
so based on the timeline and meeting the requirements, we need to make a decision
Yes, it
tonight to move forward.
Yes, because you're already, if you're going to appoint an interim, it needs to be done by the 20th of October, or the court can intervene after that time to make the appointment. So we are pretty tight in our timelines, and that's using your 2 scheduled meetings. And then also, the resolution with respect, and we'll deal with that later, for the special election doesn't need to be filed. That's regardless of whether or not you appoint, that needs to be filed by the 20th.
So a follow-up question, so if we do anything outside of the general election, it will be a cost to the city holding a special election. Am I correct?
Yes, in my conversations with the general registrar for the city, she did mention that it would be an additional cost. But if there is a special election with the November election, there's not an additional cost. I do have the answer to Mr. Barlow's question. In section 24.2-682, times for special elections, it does say, that no special election shall be held on the same day as a primary election.
Mr. Young, you have a question?
Just real briefly, thanks, Madam Chair. I recall when we appointed our colleague from the 3rd District, I think we scheduled a special meeting only because, candidly, we have so much on our agenda, and we wanted to provide, for one, the public a lot of opportunity to weigh in, and also accommodating our deliberation, etc. I'd be curious to solicit my colleague's opinion in regards to if that would perhaps make sense for us to, like we did for Cindy, to schedule a special meeting.
So, Mr. Young, if you look at the information that Ms. Lilly has provided, it talks about announcing the public hearing in the newspaper and the all media and social outlets. And just as we did with the appointment for the third district, we had input from the public. So please keep that in mind. So the public will weigh in on this decision. Ms. Lilly?
To the point about the special meeting, yes, you did have a special meeting for the purpose of the interviews and the public hearing during the last cycle. And if you were to go that route, I did work out a timeline where you have the 9th as a special meeting, but again, you all have a lot on your schedule. And so that will be up to the board members. Still, things are pretty tight, but it would give you potentially, if you wanted to run it that way, an extra few days to, it would only really give you it'll change from the deadline being the 29th to the deadline being October the 2nd, which is not, which is only a weekend, I think. But that is adding a special meeting, and you will probably want to consider all of the other meetings that you're adding to your schedule as well.
Ms. Owen?
Is Columbus Day a city holiday?
Yes.
That's the 9th.
I think that's, yeah, I don't think that they're having this particular day. I don't know if it is supposed to be not that day. Presumably, it is Columbus Day, yes.
Ms. Owen?
And you don't have to have it on a Monday. I was just sticking with the Monday cycles, so.
Any other questions or comments? Ms. Cosby?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to be clear, the interviews are open for the public.
Correct. The interviews were open for the public. The candidates who had not been interviewed were sequestered in another room.
And then it's the public hearing, right, following.
Yes, I would suggest the public hearing following that. Because of your time frame, it will not really allow us to post the names in the notice for the newspaper of the candidates that would have applied. And so the thought there is that if you put your interviews first, we would have used other mediums to put out the names, but that your public can come and comment on what they've heard.
Mr. Young?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Part of the impetus for my inquiry, and it's not per se a proposal, but just soliciting everybody's opinion regards the fact we just have so very much to do on our agenda. I want to make sure we don't shortchange that appointment. I believe we, in our due diligence, made an awesome appointment for the 3rd, and want to make sure we do the same in the 7th, and just want to make sure that we have sufficient time. That's part of my calculus.
So as Ms. Lilly, thank you, Mr. Young, but as Ms. Lilly stated, the timeline, it gives the opportunity for the public to weigh in this process. And that's important. Next item.
Well, so we need to come to some consensus as to what, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, we do need to come to some consensus as to whether or not I guess the question is whether or not we're going to use the scheduled meetings as proposed, or if we're adding a special meeting.
Well, I guess.
Mr. Young?
I'm sorry, I guess I've inquired. I'd propose a special meeting. I think it worked really well for the purpose of the 3rd, and I think we are an experienced hand after making that appointment. I recommend that we repeat what we did the first time around, if the schedule can accommodate.
Yeah. Excuse me.
Ms. Lilly?
I'm just looking at that too because we probably would need to go before the 9th then, keeping in mind that your public hearing has to be at least 7 days prior to your vote. And so we probably have to go the week prior to that, which is the week of the 2nd. And so, you know, I don't know if you all are amenable to another meeting that week, but the chair and vice chair, I'm certainly will, you know, are cognizant of making adjustments to whatever needs to be adjusted during that second meeting, during the meeting on the 2nd as well. So, yeah, because we can't go after the 9th.
Dr. Sapini?
Call for the vote for the approval.
This consensus, we're trying to get consensus to keep with the timeline as presented or add a special meeting into the schedule.
He didn't make a motion. We're just trying to get
Trying to get
throw it out, trying to get the consensus of the board as to what they want to do. And the question now is, keep with your standard meetings or add a special meeting, knowing that your special meeting, I would add, will have to be the week of the 2nd, the same week. Yes.
I guess, Madam Chair,
Mr. Young,
if I may,
Mr. Young,
I'm sorry.
I think we have other board members that would like to chime in. Mr. Barlow?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I certainly will want to devote as much attention to this matter as we need in order to come to take the time to interview these candidates. I trust that we can do that either way. I feel more comfortable approving an approach with an actual meeting tonight if I knew a date. Otherwise, I have faith that you'll be able to rework the agenda to accommodate the interviews on the 2nd.
Ms. Tor, any feedback from you? Ms. Erb?
Question of clarification. So, Ms. Lilly, what you're saying is that we would have to have 2 meetings that week of October 2nd if we added a special meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Because your public hearing has to be at least 7 days prior to your vote. And as it stood, the 9th you're running right there at their 7th day.
Okay. I don't
need the
think
16th.
I'm ready.
Mr. Young, you have a comment, question?
Well, I don't have a problem staying here late on this late on the 16th, so long as and I know that we will. We're able to do our due diligence. I'm sorry, did I miss the? No. For the 16th. Right, and then the 16th we'll actually vote on the candidate. My point is, I don't have a problem staying late into the evening, just so long as we don't shortchange all of the voluminous things that we have on our agenda.
So you're saying that you're okay with the timeline that's presented, okay? Ms. Cosby?
No, I'm a bit confused. So now we're calling for do we vote on this timeline? Do we vote on this?
You're trying to get consensus right now. If it needs to be a vote, then somebody just needs to move the proposed timeline or the timeline as proposed, and then you can add it to your record. But you just need something showing that the board has consented to this, so that Angie can put out Ms. Wilson can put out the public notice tomorrow.
Mr. Barlow?
Madam Chair, I move that we adopt the schedule as proposed.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Barlow and seconded by Ms. Dorr to approve the timeline as proposed. Any discussion? Call the question.
Ms. Dorr?
Yes.
Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Ms. Menzer?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Ms. Cosby?
Yes.
Ms. Owen? Dr. Sapini?
Yes.
Mrs. Page?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0.
Ms. Lilly?
I just wanted to make certain that it was clear what just happened. So for public consumption, tomorrow, the notice of the vacancy will go out with this particular timeline that they've just agreed to. The public just needs to be aware that on September 29th will be the deadline to submit resumes and letters of interest by 12 noon. October the 2nd, it will be the scheduled board meeting where interviews of candidates who are deemed eligible, will be held, as well as the public hearing. And candidates out there need to understand that if you are determined eligible based on your residency and et cetera, you will be interviewed on the 2nd. And then the vote will take place on the 16th.
Ms. Cosby?
Just for clarification, when we say okay, the notices will be out there, where will it be noticed?
The notice of vacancy is going to be on the website, and I will leave that to Ms. Cosby. I will leave that to Mrs. Wilson and public information to determine where they can place the notice of vacancy that will have the timeline. The public hearing notice, which is different from the notice that I'm just referencing, will be placed in the newspaper.
Okay, thank you. Next item.
The next item is 4.03, discuss the formation of ad hoc committees for funding and cultural and climate.
Okay. Board members, Ms. Collins is passing out draft language for the finance committee and draft language for the culture and climate ad hoc committee. So board members, if you remember, on the 8th of September, we participated in governance training to reaffirm our norms and how we operate as a board. Also, we established goals to focus on through the end of the year. And those goals will be posted to the RPS website. So out of those goals, we discussed the formation of these two committees, the Finance Committee and the Culture and Climate Committee. So at this time, if there are any comments or edits to the framework or the purpose and the outcomes of these committees, we can do so at this time. And also, in reaffirming our goals. Also, we discussed during our governance training, understanding our role as a board member, understanding the role of governance versus administration, so that the lines are not blurred in any form or fashion, and also agreeing to the individual board members make no request. It's the board that makes the request. Because we need to keep our focus on the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding. Everything that we do going forward, we must be in alignment with the MOU. We need to be in alignment with making sure that the resources, staff, the time that staff are utilizing to provide board work and funding. We must make it clear that everything we do must be in alignment with the MOU. And if we're asking for individual as an individual board member, we're asking for information. We need to ask ourselves, how does this impact our decision making? How does this impact, or how is this in alignment with the MOU? And that information that we're requesting as individual board members, does it have any outcomes, impact on student achievement? So we all agree that the governance training was very beneficial to everyone, and we will continue the governance training as we continue to do our work as a board. So that's the premise of our ad hoc committees for the Finance Committee and the ad hoc committee for Culture and Parliament. Ms. Cosby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to suggest in terms of a process, because for many of this is the first time we've discussed it during our board training. But these documents provide a wonderful framework for how we want to move forward with our committees. I just suggest if we can perhaps submit any changes or edits or what have you, if we want to flesh it out a little bit more to the chair, and we can add to this and discuss it further during our work session, which is October 2nd. I mean, that's my
Mr. Young.
Just real briefly, to Felicia's point, because I don't think persons in the audience have copies of these, but perhaps they do. But I just wanted to share, for example, the School Climate and Culture Committee, the priorities we identified last week regards, and I quote, ensure safety and nurturing school climates for the optimal student experience. And just wanted to editorialize that I am so excited that we're going to be spending a lot of time on that topic.
So it appears that you all are amenable to submitting edits. Ms. Erb?
I have two questions. I don't see a proposed members on the Finance Committee. Am I just not seeing it on here?
No, I know for the Finance Committee, Ms. Dorr had expressed an interest, as well as Mr. Marlowe, as well as myself. So if other members have an interest, please let me know. But I know Mr. Barlow and Ms. Dorr expressed interest. Ms. Erb?
The other, and maybe this is a question / suggestion, is to choose chairs for the committees. One of the things that with the ad hoc facilities committee was sort of at first figuring out like who did the scheduling and who did the agenda, and that could be helpful to get them moving more quickly.
So the ad hoc committee selects the chairperson of the committee. You have to submit the information to the clerk as far as proposed dates, so that so that the clerk can notice the meetings, because the ad hoc committees are open to the public. And whoever, who is designated as chair, the committee itself can create the agenda, but also you have to remember that staff is involved with the ad hoc committees. So we have to be considerate of that as well. So because remember, it's the administration that will be doing the work, not the board. Ms. Dorr and Ms. Erb.
I agree with Ms. Cosby with regards to giving everyone time to weigh in on the actual proposals, but I would like to make a motion to formalize the two committees. So my motion is that I would like to, oh,
That's on the agenda.
oh, it is, okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Van Zer?
To your point about the administration, is there, do we know who from the administration will represent for each committee?
Well, for finance, Mr. Myers, he's Chief Financial Officer. And for culture and employment, Ms. Jones. And she will raise her hand if, for those of you who do not know Ms. Jones. Ms. Cosby?
And I just want to make sure that we have some clarification. So once we formalize the fact that we're going to have these two committees, then we can go ahead and schedule them as we see. We can just go ahead and start working and schedule.
Yes, but also keep in mind, as you're coordinating your dates,
Right.
coordinating it with the administration. Okay. Next item.
The next item is 5, administration business. 5.01, receive an update on state accreditation.
Good evening, Ms. Page, Mr. Sapini, and school board members. Mr. Krantz and I are going to give you an overview of the accreditation. Mr. Krantz and I are recommending that later on we do a work session or individual sessions with you about each of the schools and how we will be providing direct support to them. This is sort of an overview in general about state accreditation. You have 3 handouts. The first one is a large chart that talks about full accreditation, partial accreditation, and denied. It should be the first chart on your packet that you received today. So as you know, accreditation standards came out last week. If you look, Richmond Public Schools has 14 elementary schools this year that are fully accredited. This includes 4 new elementary schools: Red, Stewart, Carey's, and Miles Jones. Bellevue was accredited in 16-17, but this year it has moved to the partial accreditation status. If you look at partially accredited, you have 1 school this year, again, that's Bellevue. The schools that are under 16-17 that were partially accredited, 3 of them, Carey, Miles Jones, and Stewart, moved to accreditation. The other schools there, Ginter Park, Red, Francis, and Oak Grove, are now in the denied status. And so you can see that there are 14 elementary schools fully accredited, 1 partially accredited, and 11 denied. When you look at the middle schools for this year versus last year, there really is no change. The only notice is that there are no accredited middle schools. Elkhart Thompson is still a partially accredited school. We are waiting for the state to determine the accreditation at Albert Hill. We put in an application for reconstitution, and they will determine that at their next school board meeting. And you can see that we still have the same 5 denied schools for 17-18. In high schools this year, you have 3 fully accredited: Open, Richmond Community, and Franklin. John Marshall was accredited last year. It is not accredited this year. And then you can see that with Huguenot and John Marshall are all in partial accreditation status. You still have 2 high schools that are denied: Thomas Jefferson and Franklin. Under your specialty schools, there is little change. Richmond Career Education and Employment School is fully accredited. Richmond Alternative is still in denied status. We're waiting for Amelia Street because Amelia Street also has an alternative accreditation plan that was submitted about a week ago and goes before the Office of School Improvement to determine whether or not that school will be accredited. The second chart that we provided for you is basically the same, but we wanted everyone to understand that there is some growth and people should be proud of that growth and proud of the 4 schools that moved into accreditation status. But our issue, and the district's issue, is the Warren schools. So you are fully accredited. Then if you're not accredited, you become partially Warren. It takes 3, you can either move out of partially Warren back to fully accredited, or you go for partially accredited year 1, partially Warren year 1, partially Warren year 2, partially Warren year 3. So it takes 3 years for us to move to the denied status. And what's happening is that we are not taking our schools that are partially accredited back to full accreditation. They're moving in the wrong direction to reconstitute it the 4th year or denied. And that chart sort of explains that too. I wanted you to realize that it takes that long to move down that continuum to reconstitute it or denied. And so our bulk of our work needs to be with these partially warned and the schools that are in the denied status to move them to full accreditation. If you look at the chart that we provided for you, you can also, the audience can also see that. We wanted to give you an accreditation history for you to see that in 12-13, that was when the standards were just beginning to change, and there were 32 fully accredited schools, 14 warned. No one was reconstituted or denied. Then in 13-14, there was all the standards were more rigorous, and there was the new technology-enhanced items that came along with testing, and you had 13 fully accredited schools, 31 warned, and 1 reconstituted or conditional. And then in 14-15, 11 full, 30 warned, 3 reconstituted, and 1 denied. And we wanted to show you this because that's where the work really needed to have begun, with those 30 warned, partially warned schools. And so what happened the next year in 15-16 is, yes, we gained 17 fully accredited schools, and that's great. That's 6 more schools. And we had 17 warned schools, but we had schools that fell into reconstituted and denied. And then the next year in 16-17, 16 warned, partially accredited, and then 5 reconstituted and 16 denied. And so we need to look at our instructional programs to individualize school by school, grade level by grade level, subgroup by subgroup, to ensure that we're providing supports to those students and to those schools. And then you can see what it is this year. 18 fully accredited, 5 partial, but the 19 denied should be a concern of the board and is a concern of administration. And so we need to work in a collaborative manner with all stakeholders to ensure that we move those schools to full accreditation. And we have 2 schools to be determined, but you could possibly have 20 schools that were fully accredited by the time the state board finishes looking at Albert Hill and Amelia. Mr. Krantz and I also wanted to remind you about priority schools and focus schools. We gave you just a little handout. There are a variety of schools that are focus schools and priority schools. Priority schools are the lowest 5% of Title I schools in the state. And we have 13. And they're delineated, and you can also see the focus groups. they're delineated, and that's by gap group, so you're working with individual subgroups of students. There comes with those two sanctions a lot more work for the schools and a lot of expectations that are put upon them to provide academic excellence for those children. And so we can explain that when we do individual school sharing of data and what's going to take place academically in each of those schools. But you should be proud that you have 52% that are fully and partially accredited. There is hard work to be done, but there are pockets of success in Richmond Public Schools, and people need to build on that success. And so we wanted to just highlight again one school, and this is really hard to do. I've done this for 32 years, and so Elizabeth Red was accreditation denied, the lowest rating last year, and this year moved to full accreditation. That staff, that principal, and the school system should be commended for that. That's a great deal of hard work at that schoolhouse. J.B. Stewart and Carey were partially accredited the year before and moved to full accreditation, and Miles Jones was partially accredited, reconstituted. To be reconstituted, you have to go before the state and show that you have enough gains so you don't fall in the denied status to be reconstituted. And that's what happened to Miles Jones last year, and they're fully accredited this year. So there's some outstanding work being done in those schools. We also wanted to highlight, because I think we forget when there's a great deal of low scores, that there are pockets that are achieving, and schools, when you are really low and you make a 10-point gain, that needs to be celebrated, and you need to build on those successes. So we were going to just highlight a few, and anything over 5 percentage points we think is significant. So like George Wyth's English went from 75 to 81. Albert Hill's math went from 60 to 73 percentage points. 13 points is a huge gain. They made the mark in mathematics, but you only have to be at 70 in math, science, and social studies, and 75 in English. Lucille Brown is in the right trajectory, from 50% to 58% in math. Science went from 67 to 76. And we're telling you this, and I know you can read it, but we just want to make sure we acknowledge what they're doing, watch those outstanding teachers, look for the best, and be proud of those things and build on those successes. Henderson is a priority school. Look at that growth, 10% in English from 39 to 49, and you're thinking, come on, Ms. Oakley, 49 is low, but a 10% gain is good. And we want to make those gains and higher each year to get to that 70 and 75, because they've been stuck for a while. So please celebrate that 10%. In history, they also made a 10 percentage gain, 62 to 72, and they made the mark in history. MLK is, a school that is a challenge, but I know we can do it there, and so they made a 6 percentage point gain in science. I know it's low at 26, but 20 to 26 is a gain, and you have to celebrate those to move forward. Blackwell, again, a priority school, 8-point gain in English, 48 to 56. Science, a 29-point gain, from 37 to 66. Chimborazo's math scores went from 12-point gain from 47 to 59. Elizabeth Red, which is one of your shining schools this year, English went from 69 to 80. Math went from 71 to 80, a 9 percentage point gain. Science went from 67 to 77, a 10% gain. Fairfield Science was at 71 and it went to 81, 10-point gain. J.H. Reed, they're just there. That's a priority school. You have to be at 75 in English. They went from 60 to 74. So we're going to help them, push them, and provide support there, and I know that they'll make it next year. J.B. Stewart's English went from a 25-point gain, 66 to 91. John B. Carey, 7-point gain in English, 69 to 76. Science, 11-point gain, 64 to 75. Linwood Holton, 6-point gain in science, 73 to 79. Miles Jones, again, one of your schools that moved into accreditation, 11-point gain in English from 65 to 76. They made the mark in English. Woodville, we have a lot of work to do at Woodville, but they showed great gains in history of 6 percentage points. That's a priority school from 45 to 51. And Overby Shepherd's English went from 8 percentage points from 55 to 63. I tell you that because that's what the state is looking for when Mr. Krantz and his team works with the MOU, that we're able to tier schools, we're able to show progressive success over time and to move schools from where they are. You can't really move a school that had a 25 to a 75 in 1 year. So we want to point this out so we all understand where we're going to be in year 1, year 2, year 3 down the road as you plot your course for academic success.
Mr. Barlow, Ms. Erb, and then Ms. Dorr, Ms. Owen, Ms. Cosby, Ms. Young, Dr. Sakina, and myself.
I can't stand it.
Start with the questions. Mr. Krantz.
I think as you're looking at this, Ms. Oakley said it well. There are a lot of successes that we've had happen, which we need to be proud of our 4,000 employees. That even though we're under an MOU, it's a time of some great challenges that we face as a district, there are some positives. That glass isn't all half empty, there is some half full. And if we parlay off of that strength, I'm certain that we can start turning around our numbers as you saw. But this right here, this particular schedule, I believe shows you where we as an administration has to focus working with the state. We have to take those 5 schools that are in that warrant and partially accredited and move them into fully accredited. In addition of the 18 fully accredited, and we'll gladly go through it school by school, you would see some of our fully accredited were there, but we're on shaky footing. Okay, some of our scores went backwards a little bit. So what we need to do is we need to solidify the fully accredited. We need to work to move the warrant and partial from over to fully accredited. And then those schools that are in denied, that we need 1 or 2, or there's just a couple points that are needed to move us into the fully accredited, we need to move those as quickly as we possibly can. Then we create a base of fully accredited schools that we've got a solid replication on. Now we direct our attention and focus on the remaining denied schools, which will be a long-term strategy and a long-term plan. But when you look at our schools, there are schools in our system that we talk about climate and climate and culture is a significant issue that we face each and every day. But there are schools in our system that right now are fully accredited, and one of the ones I'll take pride in is Fairfield Court. Fairfield Court that sits in one of our more challenging parts of the city, one that faces a lot of trauma each and every day, those students do, they make full accreditation. So if they can make full accreditation, there's no reason why we can't get all of our elementary schools to full accreditation. The biggest challenge you saw is going to be our middle schools, which that shouldn't surprise us. That's the grades that we start to see the drop off in our students from 5th going into 6th grade. And the middle schools are the ones we're going to have the hardest work on to get those to fully accredited. But I can tell you this, with this administration, and I know we're in an interim status, but everyone is working diligently with one thing in mind. During the course of the interim, we don't want the ball just to be stagnant. We want to see growth, so next year when we stand here in front of you, that we've moved schools from partially accredited or denied over to fully accredited. We want to see a significant gain. We have a number that we're using internally as our goal, and that's what we're going to work diligently with in conjunction with the state, because under the MOU, we can't do nothing new instructionally until we get the approval from the state. So thank y'all very much for allowing us this opportunity to go through this data with you.
Ms. Dorr.
Thanks for going through the data. And I appreciate the focus on accredited schools. I think, you know, this is stating the obvious, but obviously this is based on just as, you know, testing, right? And so I think, I know as a board, when we've talked about our priorities, and I understand that it's important for us to follow the state's MOU, but as we all know, there are other ways that we can assess value in educational experience other than just SOLs. So I just hope, I think it's important to focus on metrics, but I hope that we also, you know, broaden our discussion to assessing our schools on other things other than just tests. And then I just have a quick question about reconstituted. Is that an option only in year 4? Okay.
The end of year 3, you can either move to full accreditation. If you've made enough progress for year 4, you can ask to be reconstituted, or you move into denied status. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Barlow, I'm sorry.
On the assessment piece, one of the things that we've been criticized on is not being consistent in our assessment from school to school to school to school. So what we're doing, working with the state, is creating a uniform assessment standard, so that when you start looking at the schools and where we're at throughout the year, it'll give you the best reading possible, and we'll be coming back to you with that fairly quickly.
I also think a test score doesn't make a child. And so we want to ensure how we look at project-based learning and how we look at other types of ways to assess students so that we can see what they know, and it's not always a pencil and paper test. But we also need to look at our early literacy testing that we do to ensure that we have strong readers at K1 and 2. I just looked at that this weekend, and there's work to be done there. So I think there are lots of areas that we can look to triangulate our data across the board to make sure we're providing the best information for you and for the schools.
Mr. Barlow.
Thank you. I largely want to echo Ms. Orr's first point with the testing. I understand that this is a way that we show academic improvement, so we're all eager to watch these numbers rise, but I am just want to be cognizant of the fact that there is a lot more than testing, and just want to see moving forward how we go about balancing that classroom experience, because I don't view our kids as little testing machines, and we obviously want to provide an environment where they're getting a quality education, and aren't just being driven towards improving test scores all the time. Then another big piece of this, and it came up during the MOU discussion a fair amount, is accreditation standards, and to what extent these standards from the state impact our assessments. And I'm curious if you can give us any insight as to how standards may have changed, and if you've heard anything about how they may be changing, or will they be similar in the future. And I realize that might be something that we can do a little research on later.
So Mr. Rhodes and I will come back to you with what the 4 core areas will look like in the near future. The BDOE is making changes around the standards and making it more of what does a graduate look like, and making it more well-rounded so it's not all about meeting a test score. So we'll come back with that information for you. But the standards really started to change when you see the 13-14 time frame. That was the beginning of the more rigorous standards putting in place, and now they are now up for renewal again. So we'll bring that timeline to you through a board member and also through your board packet.
Ms. Manzur.
Thank you. I also just wanted to say thank you for highlighting the progress made. I think that was really awesome to focus on, and helped me to think about ways that I can be going back to some of the schools in my district and congratulating them. And I do think when 10 points of progress, or my goodness, 29, that's huge. And thank you for highlighting that. My question is actually similar to my colleagues around how we are doing assessments beyond the test. And you said you were going to be rethinking that, so maybe we can pause on it. But I don't even know that I've seen sort of what a school assessment looks like beyond the accreditation information and what we're doing there.
So we are talking with principals and teachers and We have not put in place like 9-week assessments or 4.5-week assessments. We are working with our principals and our associate superintendents of schools to discuss what that looks like. I can give a small assessment at the end of each class period to know what you learned that day. It could be 3 questions and have you move on. I don't have to give a big long test, so we're trying not to over test. We will be giving MAPS testing, though that is a standardized assessment. It is a growth measure, and that assessment starts in a week, and we're giving it 2nd through 9. Because we want to also be able to highlight progress in growth measures for children. Not all children make the same amount of growth in a year. And we are working with the Department of Instruction, all of our specialists, to help teachers understand how to give small progress monitoring checks within the school day and not give huge formative tests each 9 weeks or teach to the test. We're trying to see which children need to be remediated or which children can be advanced. And so we have not set up a full, big, rigorous testing around that like it used to be. We're not proposing that.
Yes.
I'm also interested in the way we are evaluating schools on the softer things. So like culture and climate, and not that that's soft, but the things that aren't sort of the academic assessment type things, and leadership within a school, and those kind of things that we know make a difference ultimately in academic improvement, but how are we evaluating and or measuring and being able to then say if a school's doing really great on they're making a lot of progress, what are the factors of which that are affecting that?
Well, it's taking the schools that reach full accreditation like a Fairfield Court, because 2 big factors that will impact anything that we do academically will be 1, attendance. Students need to be attending school. And number 2, the climate and the culture within inside those particular buildings. So looking at where we've been successful and done very positive things in unique situations that have some of the highest changes, we want to replicate those practices and put those in place at the schools that we don't see the same success. The other thing is the staff that you have. Obviously, the most important thing that's in any educational environment is the teacher. That teacher in the classroom is the most important person in that academic future of the students' lives. Fairfield, for example, is a school with a teaching staff that's been there a very long time. They've stayed together, and they continue to stay together today. So we have to not only find ways to address climate, culture, and attendance, but how do we retain our principals? How do we retain our assistant principals? How do we retain our teaching staff? I think as we start peeling back the onion and really looking at the schools and the data and all of the components, and I agree, it's not just the testing alone, but when you start peeling that back and you look at all of the aspects of a learning environment that's going on each and every day, we'll find the things that are successful, we'll find the things that we're weak on, and then we need to go address those weaknesses, okay? So it's not one size fits all, and that's where the data is going to drive us to get to the best results possible.
So Mr. Krantz is exactly right. Each school, though, has a school progress plan, and they're in the process of writing that plan, and they're doing a root cause analysis around reading and mathematics, but they're also doing running around culture and climate and coming up with specific strategies and techniques that have worked and that they will implement this year, and they'll monitor that in a monthly basis, and then the district will monitor it on a quarterly basis, so that will give some soft skill results and some things that will provide support around looking at the attendance data and the discipline data.
Ms. Owen?
Thank you so much for this. One quick question, really. The history and science in elementary school, those are only tested in 5th grade, isn't that right?
That's correct.
And at that time, are they tested on the curriculum for the whole of elementary school or just 4th and 5th? Okay, so the poor 5th grade teacher has to kind of make sure that she or he is also going back and making sure that the 4th grade curriculum is also up to stuff. So that's sort of an extra that teacher has to make sure.
Well, So let me just say that, yes, this year it was on fifth grade. The fifth graders were the only ones tested, and it is based on fourth and fifth grade. So we need to ensure that fourth grade teachers teach that science and to fidelity, and that we also need to make sure that our pacing and our curriculum scaffolds back down for fifth graders to fourth grade objectives. And Mr. Rhodes and I and the instructional team are working on that, because that is what we believe has caused the dip in science scores this year. That we did not maybe do a stellar job of focusing back on the fourth grade objectives as well. But this year we're going to have a detailed plan for teachers. We're going to train them, and we're going to provide additional supports. So that's needed. You're exactly right.
Ms. Cosby?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Coakley and Mr. Prince. I have a question about, can you just refresh my memory with reconstitution? What does that entail?
So if a school, for this year, the state has a rubrics, and a school that would be in its third year of partially warned, if they make enough percentage points in each of the 4 content areas, then we can request reconstitution. And so it is, you have to submit an application to VDOE with your plan of what will be different, and then they need to approve it based on the rubric as well as the plan that the school system submits. Prior to this year, there was a plan that the district could submit, no rubrics was involved, and then the board would approve it or not approve it. But it is what you will do different in that school to raise those scores. And it needs to be a significant difference.
Okay, so it's not just about changing leadership or changing.
It could be. That could be one point of it. You could change leadership. You could provide a different instructional program. You could have a different master schedule process to worry about, to implement interventions. It could be a combinations of things.
Okay. And you mentioned, I'm sorry. One more question. About assessments. And you said we were going to be giving the, and I'm not going to say this right, the math?
That's correct.
Okay. And you said second grade through ninth grade?
Through ninth grade, yes. And math and reading, and then selected schools have opted to do at the middle and high science and language. That's an option. Everyone is doing reading and math so we can get a growth measure. And then some schools wanted to do science and language arts, decided by their team.
In addition to?
Yes, but school decision. They decided by their school leadership team.
Ms. Young?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This dialogue this evening on the topic reminds me of a conversation that I had a freshman at William & Mary. And from the year before, we went from 4 wins in men's basketball to 8 wins. And I recall sharing with some of my peers that if we could only repeat that 2 more years, by the 4th year we'd be at 32 wins. Now, if you know anything about men's basketball, men's college basketball, you know 32 wins puts you in the Final Four. So my point is, at the risk of stating what I think all my colleagues have already shared, is that kudos on the improvement, but we've got a long way to go to get to the Final Four.
Without making any assumptions, based on what you've said, one, you mentioned about the format of the reconstitution. But can you give us a broad overview as to your specific plan as to how?
I'll be happy to send to you and the board in your next board update the reconstitution plan that was submitted for Hill. Is that what you would like? That's the one school that we did a reconstitution plan for this year.
Wasn't just for the reconstitution, just in general for those schools who are not quite there, or those who have just really have fallen short? What is your specific plan to get them to where they need to be?
You have to have been in the So you have to have been in your third year of warning, and then you have to have made some type of gain for the state to allow us to request reconstitution for your fourth year. Because your fourth year, you're either reconstituted or denied. And reconstituted allows you different sanctions and different expectations.
I got that one. Specifically for those, take away the reconstitution.
I'm not sure.
I'm on that.
All right, so you want to know what we're going to do for those schools? So we have, we're meeting with our school leadership teams to develop those plans individually by school. So some will have different intervention plans, some will have specific PD based on their specific needs. So for example, Hill's area of need is English. So we'll be looking at what additional trainings need to take place with teachers, what interventions will be in place, how we'll track individual subgroups at Hill to ensure that all of the different children from the exceptional ed group to the students with that are economically disadvantaged receive their interventions.
And the challenge will be is that working with the state, every school that's in the fully denied category will go through that same analysis. There's not one plan that fits everyone.
Right.
It's going to be school by school by school. Right now with the state, we're working on graduation. Some of the areas there. We'll begin Wednesday with our first principal meeting, and we'll start training with the state on all of our principals. And as we get into the year, I know it's not running as fast as I would like to, I think as fast as you, but we'll be getting into each individual school. The best thing would be this. Take the schools that we are fully accredited, the schools that deal with the full gamut of challenges we have within our school system. The key is how do we replicate those schools and the successes they have. You see what I'm saying? Into these other schools, and that's going to be identifying where we're weak, and then saying, okay, here's what we've got to get to, and then develop a plan to get to that point.
How often will we be able to get an update as to how well?
Once a month.
Monthly.
Monthly.
So for example, this past Saturday, you'd be proud to know that Oak Grove, Swansboro, and Blackwell had intensive training on Saturday, and 30 or 40 teachers came from those schools, and the specialists from school improvement and the Department of Instruction provided them with intense training on alignment of the curriculum, which is our biggest area of need. And then Benford also, we trained them also on alignment, but we also integrated the arts there. And those teachers are coming back next Saturday, so that's some examples of differentiation of instruction and meeting the needs in individual schools.
Thank you.
I have a comment and observation. I concur with my colleagues that our students should not be measured by our tests. And unfortunately, that is what the state, that's what they recognize. But on observation, I'm looking at the information that you provided us. So, schools, before they become denied, they go through 4 phases. First, second year warn, third year warn, and then reconstituted.
They can go first year, second year, third. Then at the end of the third year, for that fourth year, they're either reconstituted or denied, or they make full accreditation.
Okay. So
Yes,
looking
ma'am.
at this document, in 2014-15, we went from 1 school denied, 2015-16 to 5, then from 2016 to 17, 16 to 19.
That's right.
There appears to be a huge disconnect, because I know that our students and our staff have worked and continuously worked very hard, but it appears Because being a former board member, if that school went into first year warning status, the school would receive support. You have to help them to get over that hump and then move back over to fully accreditation. And Mr. Krantz, I have heard you say over and over again that central office will be in the schools, supporting our staff, providing the support that they need to help support our students to be successful. So we'll continuously join that.
Yes.
Going into the schools, providing the staff the support that they need.
We can't do our job sitting in City Hall.
That's right.
We have to be at the schools. We have to be there to support those schools and help them achieve the levels of academic success for our students at attendance. And we can't do that sitting in City Hall.
We have to analyze each of these 19 to 9 schools, because what Oak Grove needs is not what Gannon Park needs. Gannon Park needs help with reading and special education, so we need to provide supports that are individualized, and yes, City Hall staff all needs to be out in schools doing that, and we're driving that.
We don't have a cookie cutter.
No, ma'am.
So, and then in looking at the scores, the assessments, there gives me a common theme. We fell short in math and writing across the board.
All of the scores went down except for writing, and there was some growth in writing. But when we look at math and English, we need to look at our continuum.
Right.
K through 12. Yes, ma'am.
Really across the district.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's what declined. So do we have are we working on this, the administration working on a strategy to help support our schools, and that will be provided to the board at our next meeting?
Probably the 15th meeting, only because we're in concert with VDOE, and so we need to work with them to ensure that all of the interventions and supports that we're giving are in alignment with the MOU.
Okay, so the last question. Ms. Joy and I have had a conversation. The balanced scorecard.
Yes, ma'am.
Because the balanced scorecard look at school by school, grade by grade, subject area. We would receive monthly updates, quarterly updates, and I know with the MOU, the board will be receiving that type of information. But the balanced scorecard is very detailed, and you can really delve into to see where the areas of efficiencies, areas of growth, and
So, since I'm a newbie returning, is the balanced scorecard the board's desire for the way in which we chart the information to provide back to you? Is that what you would like to be used? Or something like that in that matrix system?
well, we have not had a full discussion, but that is something that the board may desire. Ms. Cosby?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I concur, wholeheartedly, at least something along those lines so that, we can have accountability continuously, and we can see where we are, so nothing is a surprise. And I think that would be very helpful, and I agree with Ms. Page, went from 1 to 5 to 16 to 19. When clearly, according to this presentation, there were opportunities along the way to kind of stem that decline. So whether it is the balanced scorecard or any other form of metrics that we can use that would be very, very helpful, I think, for the board to see. It will also help us from a policy and budgeting standpoint. If you're seeing this data and you know maybe you might need to put additional funds in certain areas to support
instruction, support our teachers, et cetera. So that would help us.
Just to give one last comment about systemic change or growth. So for example, when you look, we'll bring that to the board the next time we report out. If you look at your K through 6 reading, we also want to bring back to you the early literacy data because I've been looking at that the last couple of days, and over the last 3 years it's really declined. So we have like 20 and 30 and 35% of our children leaving kindergarten and first grade not reading on grade level. So, that's a different conversation. What are we going to do about that? And what can the teacher do? What can our reading tutors do that we bring in? Do we get state funds for that? And we also have micro volunteers. We met with them today, so we need to have a comprehensive plan, K through 6 to ensure that children are strong readers before they ever move into the high school realm, and really strong readers in our grade level by 3rd grade. So we have work to do, but it needs to be systemic.
I'd echo Ms. Page and Ms. Cosby. I've heard that the balance scorecard was a good best practice from 2 boards ago. And I love what you're talking about with regards to growth metrics, early indicators. What we've often talked about tonight about other assessments other than just SOLs. I would recommend at one of our future work sessions resurrecting the balance scorecard and figuring out if that's a good metric for us or something similar along those lines for us to consider looking at on a regular basis.
We'll bring that to back to the
Next item. The next item is item 6, board actions. 6.01, receive for action recommendations to the Richmond Public Schools Education Foundation Board of Trustees. And we have one recommended.
Good evening. I think you guys should receive Mr. Cole's resume. He is been a community member to a lot. He retired several years ago and has really devoted his time to make the changes in the education community in Richmond. So it's been done with Micah and a bunch of other things. We're very excited to have him involved. And we're welcome. If you have any questions about him, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions from board members? Thank you for this information, and I can attest to the work of the added supporter of RPS, and he's done great work in the community.
We're very excited about it. I would also add, we're beginning our thoughts for the next fiscal year, so that people are thinking about is for the jobs. Thank you very much.
You need a motion?
So,
Second. It's been moved by Mr. Young and seconded by Ms. Owen to receive the recommendation, accept the recommendation for Collins. Any discussion? Call the question?
The motion was made by Mr. Young, seconded by Ms. Owen to accept the recommendation for Donna Cole's appointment to the Richmond Public Schools Education Foundation Board of Trustees. Ms. Dorr? Yes. Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Ms. Minsberg? Yes. Mr. Young?
Aye.
Ms. Cosby? Yes. Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Dr. Sapini?
Yes.
Mrs. Page?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0. The next item is to receive for action a resolution regarding a petition for a special election to fill the 7th district vacancy. And that resolution reads, whereas Nadine Marsh Carter resigned as 7th district representative of the school board effective September 5th, 2017, by letter received on September 5th, 2017 by Don C. Page, chair of the school board.
And whereas Nadine Marsh Carter's resignation created a vacancy on the school board that occurs more than 1 year prior to the expiration of the full term for that office. And whereas in accordance with section 24.2-226 of the Code of Virginia of 1950 as amended, the school board is authorized to petition the Circuit Court of the City of Richmond, Virginia to issue a writ of election to fill the 7th District School Board seat as it is vacant. Now therefore be it resolved by the School Board of the City of Richmond that the school board determines it is required to hold a special election to fill the 7th District School Board seat as it is vacant, and to that end and in accordance with section 24.2-226 of the Code of Virginia 1950 as amended, the Circuit Court of the City of Richmond, Virginia, or any judge thereof is hereby requested to order that a special election be conducted to fill the 7th District School Board seat as it is vacant, it being the desire of the school board that in accordance with state law, said special election take place on the date of the 2018 November general election, and the counsel for the school board is directed to file a certified copy of this resolution and a petition for a writ of election with the Circuit Court of the City of Richmond, Virginia, to take all other necessary action with regard thereto. Need a motion, Madam Chair?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Dr. Sapini and seconded by Mr. Barlow to receive, approve the resolution regarding the petition for a special election to fill 7th District vacancy. Any discussion? Call the question.
Ms. Dorr?
Yes.
Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Ms. Mins-Erb?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Ms. Cosby?
Yes.
Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Dr. Sakini?
Yes.
Ms. Page?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0. The next item is to affirm the goals, vision, and mission, and the norms of the Richmond City School Board.
So board members, those documents are on board doc, and once we approve, they will be included, added to the RPS website. Need a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Dr. Sapini and seconded by Ms. Owen to affirm the board goals, mission. Any discussion? Call the question.
Ms. Dorr?
Yes.
Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Ms. Mins-Erb?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Ms. Cosby?
Yes.
Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Dr. Sapini?
Yes.
Ms. Page?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0. The next item, I'm sorry. The next item is to receive for action establishing a finance and culture and climate ad hoc committees.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Barlow and seconded by Ms. Owen to approve the formation of ad hoc committees for finance and culture and climate. Any discussion? Call the question.
Ms. Dorr?
Yes.
Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Ms. Mins-Erb?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Ms. Cosby?
Yes.
Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Dr. Sapini?
Yes.
Ms. Page?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0. The next item is to receive for action the human resources actions.
Ms. Page, members of the board, Mr. Krantz, you had at your setting a 39-page personnel report with a 1 additional page supplement. Needless to say, the department and the division in supporting the system has been busy in trying to fill our vacancies. In quick summary, we have, since the last school board meeting, forwarded our recommendation to hire 126 new employees, 85 of which are teachers. We have revised the contract of 95 others, those who have changed the role within the school system, transferring 29 others. We have received the resignations of 51 employees that number jumps out, please recognize that those are individuals that over the summer at some point elected not to return, and unfortunately they are tardy in submitting their intentions towards the end of the summer. And so the vast majority of those positions have been filled. 3 retirements, 12 returning from extended periods of leave, 6 on furlough, and you can see the name change and retirements below that. But in short, the department is working hand in hand to support the instructional efforts of our school system and getting the best qualified individuals in front of our students each and every day. I'll pause to see if the board has questions.
Mr. Young?
Not a question, just a comment. Just want to compliment our interim HR director. 126 employees is a lot of hard work, and just want to commend you and your team.
Well, thank you, sir. I have to recognize that the vast majority is done by others, but we work just, as you said, as a team and going forward. Thank you.
Mr. Pager? Also, I'd like to concur with my colleague. Thank you for the team's hard work.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that.
You're welcome. We will continue.
Madam Chair, if it's relevant to make a motion to approve.
A second.
It's been moved by Mr. Young and seconded by Mr. Barlow. Action, HR. Any discussion? Call the question.
Madam Chair, just for clarity, it's also an addendum.
I see that.
Okay, thank you. The motion was made by Mr. Young and seconded by Mr. Barlow.
Yes.
Ms. Dorr?
Yes.
Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Ms. Smith-Berg?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Ms. Cosby?
Yes.
Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Dr. Sapini?
Yes.
Mrs. Page?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0.
Next item.
The next item is to receive for action school travel and district activity request. I have one for this evening, and that is from Ms. Owen requesting to attend the Council of Great City Schools Conference in Cleveland, October 18th through the 22nd, and the estimated cost is $1,636.
Need a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Barlow and seconded by Ms. Cosby. Any discussion? Ms. Barlow?
Ms. Owen, I appreciate that you're going up there. I hear a lot of great things about this conference, so look forward to hearing your feedback on it.
And I would just like to add, Ms. Owen, thank you also for taking my place, being able to go, wasn't able to take any more time off from work. But, concur with Mr. Barlow, Council of Great City Schools is a magnificent conference, and we are looking forward to the information that you will be bringing back to share with the board. On the question?
Ms. Dorr?
Yes.
Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Ms. Manzard?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Abstain.
Ms. Cosby?
Yes.
Ms. Owen? Dr. Sapini?
Yes.
Ms. Page?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-1.
Next item.
The next item is to receive for action a resolution endorsing Senator Tim Kane's and Congressman Don McEachin's legislation to change federal tax policy to provide renovation of school buildings to be eligible for federal tax credit benefits. And that resolution reads, whereas Richmond Public Schools has over 24,000 students and an inventory of over 40 school facilities, and whereas too many of our students attend school in a building deserving of renovation, and whereas the RPS inventory of school buildings is significantly older than many other jurisdictions, and whereas this school board is committed to improving the facilities, and whereas this school board is committed to providing first-class facilities for our students and for our teachers and staff, and whereas this school board is committed to leveraging all of the options and or opportunities to improve our school facilities, and whereas legislation has been introduced in the 115th Congress by Senator Tim Kaine and Congressman Don McEachin, and whereas said legislation is entitled the School Infrastructure Modernization Act of 2017 and the Rehabilitation of Historic Schools Act of 2017 respectively, and whereas both bills would amend the Internal Revenue Code to allow rehabilitation expenditures for any building which is a qualified public educational facility, qualify for the rehabilitation tax credit. A qualified public educational facility is a school facility which is part of a public elementary or secondary school and is owned by a private for-profit corporation pursuant to a public-private partnership agreement with a state or local educational agency. And whereas if adopted by Congress and signed into law by the President of the United States, who has conveyed an interest in leveraging tax credits for the purpose of renovation, and whereas there are many RPS facility projects which may benefit from the aforementioned legislation, now therefore be it resolved that the school board of the city of Richmond hereby endorses Senator Tim Kaine's and Congressman Don McEachin's legislation to change federal tax policy to provide for renovation of school buildings to be eligible for federal tax credit benefit.
Madam Chair.
Need a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Young and seconded by Ms. Owen.
Madam
Any discussion?
Chair,
Mr. Young?
just real briefly, not going to shock anyone when I share what we all know, and specifically that we have a lot of facilities needs. And I'm excited about leveraging all the tools that we have in the toolbox, and I think that this perfectly could constitute one of those opportunities. But I look forward to conversation in regards to what some of those other tools in the toolbox can look like, to include consolidation, could look like energy savings, could look like PPA, etc. But for the purpose of this motion, I'm really excited about what our friends in Congress, specifically Senator Kaine and Congressman McEachin, have introduced, and look forward to doing whatever we can here in Richmond to support that. Thank you.
Any other comments? Board members, we need to be reminded that we do have a protocol that we agreed to as far as submitting information, and also this is work possibly be of our legislative committee and board members that we have selected to serve on the legislative committee, Mr. Barlow and Dr. Sapini. So I just want everyone to be aware of that. Call the question.
The motion was made by Mr. Young, seconded by Ms. Owen. Ms. Dole?
Yes.
Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Ms. Minz-Erb?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Ms. Cosby? Yes. Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Dr. Sapini?
Yes.
Ms. Page?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0. The next item on the agenda is new business.
So we have a new business. Next item,
Madam, just
Mr. Young.
just briefly, I was really pleased with the update from HYA, and I'm excited about where they're at, and the fact that Brad spoke to that we have over 50 or approximately 50 candidates, and wanted to, again, not unlike earlier in the evening when I solicited the wisdom of my colleagues, inquire if there would be an opportunity going forward in the next couple of weeks, next few weeks, to convene a joint school board search committee meeting for the purpose of providing for even more transparency, respecting the confidentiality terms that we agreed to, of course. But I'd love to frankly have more persons in the dais than we had this evening to hear about where we're at pertinent to the superintendent search, just because, as you said, it is such a very important subject for us. I'd love to inquire of the group if there's an interest in convening a joint meeting, school board and search committee.
Mr. Young so noted, and the board will receive an update as far as next steps. Next item.
The next item, Madam Chair, is closed session.
Sorry, I had something for new business. I was trying to raise my hand and couldn't get the attention. I just wanted to ask if we have a plan for how we're putting people onto the compact team and just where that is.
So we are looking at the dates, and also getting the information from council, and that information will be sent out to the board.
And how people will get how we will select people as well. Thank you.
I put in a request for next meeting to discuss as well.
Yes, Ms. Dorr has submitted information to discuss at the next agenda.
Thank you. Pursuant to the Personnel Section 2.2-3711A1 and 7 of the Code of Virginia 1950 as amended, I move that the school board of the City of Richmond convene in closed session to 1, discuss prospective candidates for employment and the assignment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of employees of the division, including consideration of the human resources agenda of this date. 2, for consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members or consultants for probable litigation in employee matter 1617-06.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Ms. Erb and seconded by Mr. Barlow. All
All in favor? Aye. Next thing, you are now in closed.
Right up in the camera.